हेलो स्टूडेंट, मैं ब्रजेश कुमार, डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ बॉटनी, जमशेदपुर कोऑपरेटिव कॉलेज। आज का पीजी सेमेस्टर 4 के स्टूडेंट के लिए आज का चैप्टर है इकोलॉजिकल सक्सेशन, कंसेप्ट ऑफ क्लाइमेक्स। इकोलॉजिकल सक्सेशन एंड कंसेप्ट ऑफ क्लाइमेक्स का आज डिस्कशन हम लोग करने जा रहे हैं। If a cultivated field is neglected and not sown with crop, it is covered by a growth of annual weeds in the first year, followed by biennials and perennials the second year, and a community of perennials ultimately develops. If the vegetation of a forest is destroyed and a large area is laid bare, it is first occupied by herbs, which are soon replaced by woody plants. Such vegetational changes mm, occurs in a definite sequence and take place after any disturbance of natural vegetation such as cultivation, lumbering, or forest fire. It thus comes about that all plant communities have their origin. They develop and finally mature. The origin of community begins with invasion when propagating organs village like seeds, spores, etc. arrive on a arrives arrives on a bare area by migration from older communities through the agency of wind, water, or animals. Many of these perish because the environment is not favorable. Those for which the conditions are favorable germinate in the new area, and some of them grow into mature plants. These new arrivals from outside are called pioneers. These reproduce and multiply, thus begin the colonization of new area by the pioneers, the process by which migrants adjust themselves in a new area after migration is called uh, SSS. It consists of three essential processes, namely germination, growth, and reproduction. SSS is essential in the development of plant communities. It follows migration and comprises all the process exhibited by an invading gemule from the time it enters the new area until it is truly established. Migration alone is ineffective if the uh, gemules do not grow after colonization. Further propagation leads to the aggregation of the pioneers. This result is competition for food, light, and space, especially if the plants are close together in the struggle, which is both interspecific and interspecific intraspecific many perish and only the stronger survive and multiply. The plants interact on the habits and modify the environment. This process is called reaction. Once illuminated areas become more or less densely shaded, humus accumulates and the dry areas become moist, or conversely wet areas are made drier by the absorption and transpiration of large amounts of water by the plants. On account of the effect of transpiration and the shade cast by plants, the atmosphere becomes cool and humid. The change conditions become less favorable for the early pioneers and more favorable for new invaders. The pioneers are thus replaced by new plants. These undergo the same process, modify the environment in their own way, and may in turn by ou- ousted by new invaders adapted to the changed conditions. Thus, shrubs may replace herbs and may in turn be ousted by trees. As plant succession progresses, the animal in the community also change. The animal of each several community are adapted to the plants that make the community. In this way, a gradual but sure process of evolution of plant community takes place as a result of phenomena of migration, invasion, ascesis, colonization, aggregation, competitions, interaction, and reaction described above. Ultimately, the environment becomes stable because it cannot be modified identified indefinitely. It is no It is now the climate that determines what will be the final type of vegetation, grass, land, or forest. The vegetation that develops ultimately will be more or less permanent and will be in equilibrium with the climate. Thus, is the highest type that the habitat can support under the prevailing climate and is called the climax community. The dominant species of a climax community are nearly by in complete harmony with the environment, so that the community is relatively stable and will not change so long as the climate and physiographic factors remain the same. Moreover, those dominant species are in complete control of the environmental factors such as light, space, humidity, nutrients, etc., so that successful invasion by new species is now mostly out of question. The result is that in a climax community, the number of species is not large. In any case, it is much smaller than in some of the intermediate stages. The communities that occupy a new area are constantly changing till the establishment of a stable climax community. The biotic community of an area has a life history just as an individual plant or the animals has. It is born, develops, and ultimately matures. This process of evolution of biotic communities on bare areas from both to maturity is called ecological succession. The above discussion lead to three major conclusions. First, succession consists of community direction. Second, it is a result of change that the existing community brings about in the physical environment. Third, it leads ultimately to the establishment of relative stable community which is almost in complete harmony with the condition of the environment. It should be borne in mind that succession is not physical but a biological process and is controlled by the community and not by the physical environment. The latter only determines the pattern and direction of succession but does not cause it. Plant succession. An area to An area to be occupied with life starts as a lake to be filled in with soil or a mountain of rock to be eroded into soil. The same area is eventually occupied successively by a series of different plant communities till a final or climax stage is developed. The development stages in the process of plant succession are called several stages, and the entire sequence of communities on a given site constitutes a share succession beginning in watery habits. Ponds, lake, marshes are called hydrage, and the whole sequence of development stages constitutes hydrosphere. Success beginning in saline water is a halospheric. Succession beginning in dry situation are termed J, J, exarch, exarch, and the different stages of the share constitute zero share. Two types of zero shares are distinguished, namely lithospheres originating on bare rocks and Passamosaurs occurring on sand. Bare the bare area on which succession being may be primary or secondary. A primary bare area is one on which no plant life grew before, so that the area is sterile and conditions are not at first favorable for life. For example, glacial regions exposed by region of ice, a new oceanic island, newly deposited volcanic ash or rock. A secondary bare area is one or which plant life once existed but has now been destroyed, so that nutrients and conditions for life are already favorable, cut out or burnt out forces, abandoned cropland and new ponds formed after heavy rains or floods are examples of secondary war areas. Succession beginning in a primary area is called primary succession, and see and the series of development changes are called Priceras. The corresponding terms for succession on a secondary area is secondary succession, and subshares. In subshares, the substratum contains already formed soil and humus, and may contains seeds in parasites. The substratum is usually sandy rock or water. The above facts lead to the following classification series: Pe- Price, Pricerus, Subcerus, Pricerus hedarch, Subcerus hedarch, Hydrosaur, Heliosaur. Hydarch, Priceers, Hydrarch, Hydrosaur, Heliosaurs. Gerarch, Simosaurs, Lithosaurs. Subsaurs, Hydrarch, Gerarch. The secondary succession, the rate of change is more rapid and the time required for the completion of share is much shorter than in primary succession. In any succession, whether primary or secondary, each serial stage is a temporary community. It may remain for a very short period or it may continue for years together. Sometimes some serial stages are bypassed or completely missed. It may be mentioned that the climax vegetation in any area is ultimately determined by the climate. The climax community throughout a climatic region is therefore the same whether it being as a gerosaurs or a hydrosaurs. Typical examples of plant succession are described below. अगले क्लास में हाइड्रोसेयर्स पर डिस्कशन करेंगे. ओके, थैंक यू.